Okay. I had to for some reason, it won't let me go live on my phone unless I have it upright, my phone instead of horizontal. Okay. Well, I am coming to you from Sarasota, Florida. This is Sheea Shafer, your Tantra coach and spiritual reader. And one thing I thought would be interesting to talk about today is the Jesus diet. So, what is the Jesus diet? Maybe you've never heard of that. Well, Jesus was part of a group or a sect of the Jewish people called the Essenes. So you probably heard of, like, back in the day, back in his day, there were the Pharisees and the Sadducees who unfortunately had gotten pretty corrupt at that time, which is partly why he came in when he did into that point of history, is his own lineage was getting too pious and high and mighty and too like legalistic and all those things, too much ego. And also money entered the picture too, where they were starting to value money by selling offerings and any number of things. So the Essenes were the sect of the Jewish that stayed on track for how things were supposed to be and how to live consciously. They were constantly going through initiations, and most all of Jesus's family and disciples were part of the Essenes. I think Peter was the only one who kind of got adopted in, and of course, Paul was not. He came later, and either his um, either his writings were manipulated, which is very much so the case, I'm sure, um, because he's not actually on alignment with what Jesus wanted for to be shared. And it's funny how just a little tweak or degree in one direction can make it go off. But anyway, that's another video, isn't it? Let's talk about the Jesus diet or the Essene diet. So this is what I've come across to be the most conscious diet out there. And I think it's important to acknowledge that you may not be able to just go do a straight shot to this. And that's where we need to have grace and compassion with ourselves. Because if we're really far from what I'm about to share, then you got to take baby steps and you acclimate and your body adjusts to the point where then you can finally eat this clean and healthy and incorporate everything because it takes time. So, the basic principle of the Essene or Jesus diet, the way they ate, is they were mostly eating live, fresh food, which totally makes sense because that's where the mana is, that's where the life force is. It has life force in it. Vegetables and fruits that you pick straight from the ground or the tree or fresh right then and there in the moment, in the now. um, they're juiced up and alive. Um, they're full of water, which carries a lot of that aliveness and that life force energy. So, in comparison or contrast, there's not going to be any life force energy in a canned product or even a frozen product. It's a little bit better frozen, but I notice that when I eat frozen products a lot of the time, especially if it's vegetables, unless it's just that they're using really poor quality vegetables when they freeze them and that's all we get access to, but it just doesn't taste the same. It's not fresh. It seems to be a little bit like no flavor, just tasteless. The vegetables are just blah, and it's just not interesting. Anyway, so when you talk about like canned or dried or frozen, it's basically dead in some way, or, if we want to take it this far, like meat, for instance, is a dead, it was once a living thing that's now dead, and the life force has left it by the time we get it. And so it's almost like you're eating a corpse, which is a weird thought, isn't it? But that's kind of what we're doing, the corpse of an animal. And you can imagine eating a corpse of an animal that maybe just died versus a day old corpse versus a week old corpse. You get my picture? It's kind of gross. There's no life force. It's just, there's no ATP in that food. So that's the main reason why we were meant to eat fresh, alive food that has water in it, because that life force is very much so a part of that water. And so that's the first concept to follow, to move in that direction, right? Um, and then another concept is they didn't eat, they didn't kill anything in the way of animals to eat them because we're in this oneness Christ consciousness. That's just not Pono. It's not cool. It's not how we do things. But you are able to, one example that was kind of interesting is like they do have dairy products, but they have to be raw and fresh. So, like the cow's milk, it's revered in India for a reason, for that very reason, in a way, at least it's one of them, because it is high in protein and if it's fresh and raw, it has a lot of good stuff in there that's loaded that can benefit those who are eating kind of that vegetarian diet. So that means anything made from it. So the milk, cheese, cottage cheese, yogurt, all that stuff, as long as it's raw and fresh. Now, granted, if you're a blood type like myself, you benefit even more from that particular aspect of eating because we are actually rigged to handle dairy products better than any of the other blood types. The other blood types, I might not overdo it, is maybe how I'd say it. And if you have raw dairy, which I looked it up today, and surprisingly, it was easy to find. Yay, that's a good sign. At farmers markets, they'll have it. They have it here at a place called Detwilder's Farmers Market, which is a store, but kind of like a farmers market style. They have it at health food stores. I know when I was in Austin, they actually had a raw dairy, like a um, what do you call those? Portable unit that they would park in a certain place and you can walk in, and it had the freezers or fridges all along one side, and then you could walk along them and pick out what you wanted, and the register was at the end. So it was a very small basic setup, but they used like um, the same kind of vehicle you would use if you were going to do a restaurant on wheels kind of thing. So anyway, there's protein there, and that includes eggs, because that obviously comes from chickens, but you're not eating the chicken, you're just eating the byproduct or the egg from the chicken, which is, I guess, considered okay. And of course, I know the Essenes, they're very sustainable and kind and all that. So they're not overdoing it. They're not over plucking these things from the animals. They work in unison as part of a whole ecosystem together where everybody wins and benefits. So, and I'm thinking part of the reason why dairy is okay in their eyes is that because cows just eat grass. Cows aren't carnivores eating other dead flesh. They're actually just eating grass. So that's what probably makes that more doable. Um, what else can I say? Obviously, seeds and nuts, fruit and veggies, you can pretty much eat as much of that as you want without really getting fat, unless you don't want to overdo nuts because they're just high calorie items. So usually a handful at any given time, but you can eat as much fruit and veggies as you want without getting fat. The fruit has a very cleansing effect. It has so many enzymes that it's literally helps digest itself as well as your other food. And then veggies, yeah, it just has so much fiber too, even in fruit. Like today I ate carrots and it's like immediately I had a bowel movement afterward because they're so dense as far as fiber goes. So those little carrots you can get at Trader Joe's or whatever are a great snack that I take with me in the car every day when I do errands or appointments because I can just chomp on those and they're crunchy and they just have way more fiber than even other things. Because, even beans and rice has a lot of fiber, which is why that works, by the way. Not just the fact that it makes a complete protein together. So it's like the vegetarian way to eat protein, but it also, has a ton of fiber, which fills you up and gets you satiated. So, and also just to also, highlight or comment on the fact that you can't do mainstream dairy and expect it to work the same. Mainstream dairy is manufactured in a large scale where they shoot them up with hormones and all kinds of crap to make them to fatten them up. There's a lot of extra estrogen there, and their conditions are awful. And then they even add sugar to the milk and stuff like that. And of course, they add tons of sugar to yogurts and kefir, and so you have to be careful. So it's not the same. You can't just buy store bought pasteurized dairy because the pasteurization process heats it up to the point where it makes it dead. Thank you very much. Kills off all the positive, probiotics and healthy bacteria, acidophilus, all that. And then they say they add it back in, but then why add it back in if you just went to all that trouble to kill it? That makes no sense. So they're probably just putting a benign acidophilus in there that actually isn't even there. That's my theory. Oh, goodness, how our food I just invoke and activate with you right now as you as my witness that all these things get corrected and easily put into law that, no more GMO, no more MSG, no more BS, no more aspartame and chemicals and hormones and fattening agents and phytoestrogens and all that stuff. Let's just have pure food. Thank you very much. That is how it was meant to be from the beginning. So, as an example, you might be a big meat eater, and of course you would be, especially if you're an O blood type, which is the majority of the planet, 85%. Um, and then there's also the A blood types, which is you're meant to eat vegetarian, period. That's how you're built. And then there's the AB, which is kind of a mixture of the A, and then I'm a B. And, we're allowed to have dairy out of the group. Whereas the O's, you're the ones that benefit a lot from like the Atkins and the keto because you can't handle carbs without gaining weight. So you just best to eliminate it altogether. So you have more of a, protein diet. And so how would you handle this? Is you would have to make sure and rely on getting that beans and rice in different combinations, perhaps soy that's non-GMO'd. Um, you may have heard about that famous bodybuilder who eats soy and just other forms of protein just fine. Um, I learned a lot of this from Aaron Abke, Aaron with an Abke, Abke. He has his own channel and he's the one that did a lot of the research to uncover a lot of this. And it just sort of confirmed the other documents that I was reading as well about the Essenes because they talk about it. They lived very simply and humbly and fresh and clean. And, they used lentils and beans, and we know about beans and rice. We know about soy as a high form. And of course, the dairy is also a high form of protein. And then in this day and age, you can use things like protein powders and whatnot, but keep in mind it's not alive, it's not fresh. So that's the downside. I mean, it's better than nothing, but I don't know about you, but I can't have a protein shake after a heavy workout and have it work. Like I'll just get sore as heck and it just doesn't do the job. So it has to be real and fresh. And then I'm sure there are many other forms of protein that we haven't mentioned that are on the list. Um, things like chili and burritos and um, you got to get creative, though. It's true. I mean, you have to learn how to be more creative when you're vegetarian, especially around protein. But there's a lot of things that have high protein that we didn't think of, like peas, and even broccoli has a certain percentage of it, and things that you sometimes wouldn't normally think would have a lot of protein in it does. Um, I'm thinking of a certain nut that it's kind of hard to find. It's like really high in protein. Um, and yeah, it's something that, might require some research or looking at more YouTube channels about that in particular. But I just wanted to inspire you guys because I just heard it again about this and I was like, oh, I had forgotten about that. So that's why I sought out the raw dairy nearby that I could go to and get. So it makes it the real deal instead of some imitation version of. Most of the time, the food we eat is an imitation of real food. And the real food's always going to be better than the imitation because the imitation is fake and without the life force. And your body's like, really? You think I'm not going to tell the difference? So if you want to have that glow, in your face and that health, that sense of health in your body instead of looking maybe like death warmed over, then you eat live food that's fresh. Now, one of the ways that I do it, and it also is a higher form of protein this way too, is sprouts and microgreens happen to be like superfoods that are really high in protein and just nutrients in general. So like there's kale sprouts and broccoli sprouts and of course like alfalfa sprouts, which you might want to watch because that's highly estrogenic. So it just depends on where you're at in your life cycle. But um, there's all these different mixes of, mustard sprouts and all kinds of things. And you can often get a mixture of all of them. I've been really pleased to find them in even regular grocery stores. You got to just look for it though, because like, Trader Joe's carries one. And oftentimes the grocery store will carry one choice, and you just got to find that one section where it's just loaded up right there. And it's kind of easy to get them down. I mean, you could put it in a smoothie, but I usually put it in my salads or make a salad out of it. And it's just so light and easy to get down because your system, because like it's less dense than say like broccoli stalks or something that's denser. It's just kind of these light, fluffy little leaves, microgreens, sprouts. There's just so easy to kind of even just put a whole gob in your mouth just straight and just make sure you get that daily dose, in. So that's another tip that you can biohack with to help the situation. All right. I guess one of the practices I'd also like to mention is that they did a kind of an intermittent fasting, regular weekly fasting type situation where on the Sabbath they would fast. So, as you can imagine, that creates autophagy and sort of corrects you if you overate it all that week so that, on that weekly seventh day, Sabbath days, maybe it's a Sunday or any day you choose, you're sort of self-correcting on a weekly basis instead of doing like a cleanse once a year or once every 6 months. And then they also ate like 2 meals a day instead of 3 because that's that sort of under eating thing where, you get used to it actually. You may not be used to it at first and that's why baby steps, right? But I know I've been eating that way for a long time and I wish that showed up better, actually. But I know a lot of us have thyroid stuff like I do and whatnot. I don't know. Maybe it's just genes or whatever. But, and not eating at night. So, like several hours before bed, stop, so that you can sleep well. But, I know breakfast and lunch is a big thing, and then dinner is more like a light thing, and they would just shift their times to make it work for you, right? And baby steps, right? So if like fasting a whole Sabbath day seems like a lot for you, maybe just have fruits and vegetables and liquids that day, and that's your version of fasting because it's more doable. Or just have fresh stuff, or just cut out meat that day so that you have a lighter day on your body and it can kind of play catch up a little better. So there's different ways to tweak this to make it work for you. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and let's all eat like the Essenes. They knew what they were doing, and obviously Jesus did.